You start?
Yes. Good morning. Bonjour tout le monde, dear committee members, dear participants. Thank you all for connecting. And before we begin, I'd just like to make a few logistical announcements for the meeting. Firstly, concerning interpretation. The debates will be interpreted in English and French, which are the working languages of the committee, and at the bottom of your screen you can find the button to select the interpretation language. We are working on the Zoom platform, and in order to take the floor you will need to connect to the session using an active meeting link. If you require an active meeting link, please register through the web page indicated on the screens, as you can see now on the screens, and in case of any technical problems, please write to the Secretariat at ichmeetings@unesco.org. That's ichmeetings@unesco.org. Please also be advised that the debates of the meeting will be transmitted by webcast in real time through the web page of the convention. I think we are now ready to start, and we have the honor of having the ADG of the culture sector with us, Mr. Ernesto Otone. Please.
Thank you, team. Welcome to all. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to members of the committee, state parties of the convention, and observers connecting from around the world. I'm aware that it is a very busy period for all of us. Under the 2003 convention, a series of statutory meetings have been taking place. This is already the 11th statutory meeting of this year. And in this demanding context, I'm grateful for your dedication and commitment. This extraordinary session was convened at the request of the committee at its 16th session at the end of last year to discuss the results of Part 3 meeting of the Open-Ended Intergovernmental Working Group held on 25th, 26th April 2022 in the framework of the global reflection on the listing mechanism. The recommendations of the working group are being presented to the committee in the form of revisions of the operational directives. With the endorsement to the committee, this proposed revision will be presented to the 9th session of the General Assembly that begins next week. The global reflection took place in 3 parts. The Part 1 and Part 2 meetings of the Open-Ended Working Group took place in July and September last year. They dealt with the priority topics identified by the governing bodies of the Convention. The recommendation of Part 1 and Part 2 meetings were presented in the form of the proposed revision to the operational directives. They were endorsed by the 16th session of the committee at the end of last year. The Part 3 meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group took place in April this year. The working group discussed issues related to the annual number of files and related aspects, such as the composition and working methods of the evaluation body, as well as other technical matters. We are meeting in this 5th extraordinary session of the committee in order to approve the recommendation of the Part 3 meeting of the working group, once again in the form of the proposed revision to the operational directives. Next week, the 9th session of the General Assembly, which will be held from 5th to 7th July, will approve the revisions to the operational directives, as endorsed by both the 16th session of the committee and this 5th extraordinary session of the committee. This will cover the recommendation of all 3 parts of the working group. This is a real achievement, as the approval will conclude the global reflection, which has been ambitious in its scope and technically very complicated. I'm aware that a great deal of work has gone into the preparation of the proposed revision to the operational directives that you will be examining today. First and foremost, allow me to recognize the efforts of the working group, who prepared the recommendations through its Part 3 meeting. A special thanks must go to the chairperson of the working group, the Ambassador Oike from Japan, whose able leadership made it possible for the working group to conclude its work. I would like to take this opportunity to especially thank the government of Japan for their financial support throughout the whole reflection process. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to draw your attention to the additional item on our agenda. This relates to the request made by Ukraine on 21st April this year to examine as soon as possible the nomination culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking as a case of extreme urgency in reference to Article 17.3 of the Convention. This is the first time in the history of the Convention that we will be applying this provision. Following the proposal of the Bureau at its meeting on 23rd June, which considered the recommendation of the evaluation body and the subsequent electronic exchange with committee members, the provisional agenda of this extraordinary session was revised on 28 June to include the request by Ukraine. Dear committee members, I would like to underline the speed at which we were able to process this request. Thanks to the efforts of all those involved, we were able to ensure the treatment of the request by Ukraine within 10 weeks of its submission. This reflects the potential of the 2003 Convention mechanism to be flexible in response to situations of extreme urgency. With this in mind, I wish you all a fruitful deliberation and thanks to all. Okay, now we move on item 2, election of the Bureau. Dear members of the committee, we need to elect the Bureau for this extraordinary session. Please refer to document 2. In the case of an extraordinary session, the committee shall elect a chairperson, one or more vice chairperson, and a rapporteur who shall remain in office until the end of that session, pursuant to Rule 13.2 of the Rules of Procedures of the committee. Following the practice used in almost all of the past extraordinary session, I understand that there is a general agreement to ask the Bureau of the 17th session of the committee to serve as the Bureau of this extraordinary session. This means the chairperson will be Her Excellency the Ambassador of Morocco, Monsieur Samir Adare, and vice chairperson will be ensured by Switzerland, Czechia, Panama, Republic of Korea, and Botswana. Your rapporteur will be Mr. Ramiro Maurice Silva Rivera from Peru. Does anyone have any objection on this proposal? I see none, so we can adopt by acclamation. So we're going to wait 2 or 3 minutes because I was informed that the ambassador of Morocco is in the building. So we're going to wait 2 minutes. We will ask. He's on way. So we're going to wait 2 minutes and we will ask him to take his place in the podium. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and we have with us the chairperson, Monsieur Samir Adare, to has taken his place. Thank you so much. Congratulations, Mr. Chairperson.
Merci, Monsieur l'ADG, Monsieur le Secrétaire, Mesdames et Messieurs, Excellences, chers amis. Je voudrais d'abord vous remercier, chers membres du comité, de m'avoir confié la tâche importante de présider cette 5e session extraordinaire, et j'en suis extrêmement honoré. Et je ferai tout mon possible, évidemment, pour que notre réunion se déroule du mieux possible. Chers membres du Bureau, félicitations et bienvenue, et je me réjouis de travailler en étroite collaboration avec vous tous aujourd'hui. Félicitations à tous. Et sans plus attendre, passons maintenant à la décision. Veuillez vous référer au document 2, LHE/22/5.ext.com/2 et à son projet de décision au paragraphe 3 qui est affiché sur les écrans. Merci. Puis-je demander au comité d'adopter le projet de décision tel qu'affiché sur les écrans? Et s'il n'y a pas d'objection, puis-je donc déclarer la décision 5.ext.com2 comme étant adoptée? Est-ce que je n'en vois pas. Je considère que la décision est adoptée. Merci beaucoup. So let's move to item 3, which is about the adoption of the agenda. Please refer to document 3, LHE/22/5.ext.com/3.rev. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours to present this item to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So there are two main items on the provisional agenda of today's extraordinary session. They are item 4 and item 5. So concerning item 4, the extraordinary session was convened by the 16th session of the committee through its decision 16-COM14, and the purpose is to discuss the results of the Part 3 meeting of the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group within the framework of the global reflection on the listing mechanisms of the Convention. This corresponds, again, as I said, to item 4 of the provisional agenda. As was mentioned also by the Assistant Director General in his opening remarks, An additional item was added on 28th of June regarding the request by Ukraine to examine the nomination culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking as a case of extreme urgency. And this corresponds to item 5 of the provisional agenda. While I'll present the details of this second case when we come to item 5, the inclusion of the request by Ukraine as a new agenda item followed the electronic exchange with the committee that was initiated by the Bureau of the 17th session of the committee and with reference to Rule 2.2 of the Rules of Procedure of the committee. The electronic exchange sought the agreement of at least 2/3 of the committee members to include the item on this request in the 5th extraordinary session of the committee as proposed by the Bureau. And since the agreement from 2/3 of the members was obtained, the Secretariat has revised the provisional agenda of today's session accordingly and published the corresponding working document on 28th of June 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to take the floor? I see no request for the floor. So let us move now to the decision. Please refer to document LHE/22/5.ext.com/3 and its draft decision in paragraph 4. Can we see it on the screen? Yes. Can you scroll it here? Thank you. May I ask the committee to adopt draft decision as shown on the screens? Seeing no objections, I therefore declare decision 5.ext.com3 as adopted. Thank you. Dear members of the committee, dear colleagues, we can move on now to the next item, which concerns one of the core issues bringing us together today. This concerns the global reflection on the listing mechanisms of the 2003 Convention, and in particular, the results of the Part 3 meeting of the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group, which met in April this year. I have the pleasure to welcome the chairperson of the working group, Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Japan to UNESCO, Mr. Atsuyuki Oike, to join us on the podium. Welcome, Ambassador. Thank you, Excellency. May I ask you to give a report on the working group to the committee? The floor is yours, Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Ambassador Samio. Dear colleagues, it has been an honor to be entrusted with the chairmanship of the open-ended working open-ended intergovernmental working group in the framework of the global reflection on the listing mechanisms of the 2003 Convention. Allow me to first summarize the process with which the global reflection took place. The 13th session of the committee in 2018 launched the global reflection on the listing mechanisms of the convention and established the open-ended intergovernmental working group to spearhead the reflection. The Part 1 meeting of the working group took place in July 2021, followed by the Part 2 meeting in September 2021. The recommendations of these two parts were endorsed by the 16th session of the committee in December 2021 in the form of draft amendments to the operational directives. While the Part 1 and Part 2 meetings of the working group successfully addressed the priority reflection topics, the 16th session of the committee also requested the working group to take on additional issues by extending its mandate. Part 3 meeting of the working group was convened on 25 and 26 of April 2022. The committee is meeting in the extraordinary session today to discuss and endorse the proposed revisions to the operational directives based on the recommendations of the Part 3 meeting of the working group. The proposed revisions of the operational directives related to the recommendations of all three parts will be presented to the 9th session of the General Assembly. This is why it was necessary to convene an extraordinary session before the 9th session of the General Assembly without waiting for the 17th session of the committee at the end of the year. Now allow me turn now specifically to the Part 3 meeting of the working group. The Bureau established for Part 1 and Part 2 of the working group's meeting remained in office until the end of Part 3. I take this opportunity to thank the 5 chairpersons from Germany, Poland, Peru, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kuwait for their great help. Thank you very much. Also, a big thanks go to all the stakeholders involved, including the experts who participated in the earlier consultation in 2021 and the members of the working group. Your commitments and hard work made it possible to accomplish a thorough reflection despite the challenges posed by the pandemic. The Part 3 meeting of the working group was asked to reflect on 9 topics grouped into 2 main categories. Can I ask the Secretariat to display them on the screen? Okay, now we have them on the screen. The first category concerns 5 discussion topics that were ultimately linked to the annual number of files. This included, most importantly, the composition and the working method of the evaluation body. As you can see, there are 5 items there. And now let me move to another category. The second category comprised other issues that required further reflection. They have topics 6, 7, 8, 9, as you probably remember. I'm not going to go through it again, but those are the items that we discussed in the working group. Now, focus was given to topic 1. Can we go back to topic 1? Yes, thank you very much. This is topic 1. This was considered as the main subject of discussion since many of the other topics were considered as dependent on the outcome of the discussions on topic 1. The working group discussed all 9 topics one by one as they covered important, rather independent aspects of the listing mechanisms. The part 3 meeting of the working group made 12 recommendations. You can find them in Annex 1 of the document for this item. The document number, I'm sure that you know of this, so I'm not going to repeat the number of the document, but it's in Annex 1. So it's on the screen now. Let me just talk about one by one. The first, the annual ceiling, and then paragraph 1. This is recommendation 1. Recommendation 1 proposed to set up the annual ceiling of the nominations to the urgent safeguarding list, the representative list to the register of good safeguarding practices at no more than 60 dossiers per year, no more than 60 dossiers per year. But this one is related to the third item. Now, recommendation 2 requested that the Bureau of the Committee examine all those requests for international assistance while also setting a limit of $100,000 per request. Now, recommendation 3, paragraph 3, the sustainable staffing requirements of the Secretariat was the subject of recommendation 3. The working group requested the Secretariat to prepare a proposal on the financial and human resources needed for the strengthening the listing mechanism. This proposal shall be submitted for examination by the committee for transmission to the Executive Board of UNESCO and the 10th session of the General Assembly in 2024. By the way, in relation to this particular topic, I would first like to thank the Secretariat on the evaluation body for increasing the number of files up to 60. We highly appreciate their efforts in this regard. But at the same time, there was a strong view expressed in the working group that the number should be even higher. And in this connection, we had extensive discussions on this topic, and we agreed on the language contained in this recommendation. So I would expect that those proposals from the Secretariat are probably coming to the committee meeting at the end of this year for further process ahead. Now, moving on to the next ones, the order of priorities, recommendation 4. The working group also recommended that the current system of priorities to be continued as contained in recommendation 4. Recommendations 5 and 6, the working group proposed that requests regarding transfer from urgent safeguarding list to representative list and requests regarding inscription on an extended or reduced basis are to be considered outside annual ceiling. This relates to recommendation 5 and 6 respectively. By the way, let me draw attention to a particular phrase contained in those paragraphs. This is on an experimental basis. Again, we had considerable discussions on this item, and for now, we agreed that those requests should be outside the annual ceiling. But depending on the future situation, depending on the number of files coming under those categories, we may need to come back to this issue at a later stage. So let me emphasize that this agreement is on an experimental basis. Now, moving on, the working group also proposed that the composition of the evaluation body should remain unchanged, as included in recommendation 7. Now, recommendation 8 proposes that the backlog files older than 4 years are to be removed from the backlog. Again, here we had considerable discussions, and I'm coming back to this issue at a later stage because some delegations wanted me to mention some points in this regard. Now, moving on to paragraph recommendation 9, the working group clarified under Recommendation 9 that the proposal to revise a priority for the examination of nomination files for state parties that did not fulfill reporting obligations can be considered at a later stage. There has been considerable improvements in the reporting obligations, and therefore this will be a topic for discussion, if necessary, at a later stage. The Recommendation 10 also indicates that the possibility of obtaining additional information regarding nomination by using a dialogue process with accredited NGOs has been incorporated in the new initiative on the broader implementation of Article 18 of the Convention. Well, I understand that this initiative is financially supported by the generous contribution of Sweden and is scheduled to be launched in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the working group proposes under Recommendation 11 any exceptional cases that increase the annual ceiling shall be reviewed by the committee after the initial discussion by the Bureau as soon as possible based on agreed criteria. This question of agreed criteria, I'll come back to this point at a later stage. And finally, the working group did not consider that it is necessary to pursue the proposal to introduce preliminary assessment procedures to the existing upstream process as indicated by Recommendation 12. Now, let me make a little bit of references to the discussions and special requests for comments from several delegations. During the Part 3 meeting, I was requested by some members of the working group to include 2+1/2 issues, two issues essentially in my report to this extraordinary session of the committee. One issue concerns backlog files, which is dealt with in Recommendation 8, while the other relate to the procedure to examine exceptional cases, which is included in Recommendation 11. Now, Recommendation 8, the topic on backlogs was raised when discussing issues linked to the annual number of files. Files that could not be treated due to the annual ceiling and the priority system are commonly called backlog files and stay in the pipeline of nominations. Long discussions were held on this issue, and the working group's Recommendation 8 states that backlog files older than 4 years should be returned to the submitting states. Some delegations expressed their concerns that a few countries with a significant number of backlog files would not be able to have their files withdrawn, submitted again, and be evaluated within 4 years, in the sense of Recommendation 8. And therefore, those state parties with many backlog files would be required to update their files a second time. And therefore, it was suggested that the Secretariat open a dialogue with those states to establish a plan for the resubmission of their backlog files. As you can see in our recommendation, those member states with a large backlog are invited to update their files. Now, the second topic that I was asked to report was raised when discussing other issues requiring further reflection. Item 11 of the agenda of Part 3 meeting. It relates to the procedure to examine exceptional cases. Some delegations expressed their wish that discussions take place to identify a group or body to work on establishing the criteria for the definition of exceptional cases in the context of the 2003 Convention. This is reflected in the sentence based on agreed criteria included in the recommendation. And also, I can refer you back to Recommendation 11. The last sentence, the working group invites the Secretariat to recommend possible criteria to define exceptional cases. Again here, there was a very, very long discussion on this one. So I would expect the Secretariat to come up with some suggestions for possible criteria to be discussed in the process ahead. The issue of working group or body is something that we may be able to discuss in the context of the General Assembly. Now, finally, let me just mention one point. This is not really, I was not really asked to include this in my report to the committee. It is rather in my report to the General Assembly. Some delegations were, in the context of future discussions about the new working group to be financed and chaired by Sweden, there was a suggestion that some items discussed in the working group context should be registered in one way or another in the agenda of the future working group on Article 18. Now, the working group that I chair did not have a mandate to do it. So therefore, I have been asked to share that information in my report to the General Assembly. And the purpose essentially is to share this information with the state parties for further discussions in the working group, working group on Article 18 of this convention. So this is probably all that I have been asked to say. Mr. Chair, Ambassador Samil, these are the main points that I wanted to present to the committee this morning. I would be happy to answer any questions about the reflection process that the member states of the committee may wish to raise. Following the request of the working group, the Secretariat has prepared a set of draft amendments to the operational directives based on the recommendations of Part 3 meeting. I understand that the Secretariat is ready to present in detail the proposed amendments to the operational directives. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador and dear friend Oike. Your report gave a good account of the discussions, and I wish to congratulate all the members of the working group who, under your steady guidance, accomplished the challenging task to reflect and make pertinent recommendations to the issues under the reflection. The work that you have achieved collectively will for sure be very important for the future of the Convention. Before asking the Secretariat to take us through the proposed revisions to the operational directives, anybody wishes to take the floor, I just wanted to mention that if committee members wish to take the floor, please refrain from discussing the revisions to the operational directives now, as our debate will take place after the Secretariat has explained the revisions. So, is there any questions from the members of the committee? I see no request for the floor. It seems that Ambassador Oike was very, very clear and everything went fine. So, dear colleagues, thank you for sharing there's no point of views, but I would like to turn to the Secretariat to present the proposed amendments to the operational directives to reflect the recommendations of the Part 3 meeting of the working group. Mr. Curtis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And as mentioned by the Chairperson of the Open-Ended Working Group, the Secretariat was then tasked with the translation of the recommendations of the Part 3 meeting of the Working Group into the form of proposed amendments to the operational directives. And so I would like to just take a little bit of your time to explain how that is now presented to you. After reviewing all the recommendations, the Secretariat realized that it was really only recommendations 1, 2, 4, and 7 out of the 12 recommendations made by the working group, which actually required revisions to the operational directives. And for this, I'd ask you to refer to Annex 2 of the document for which explains it. So the implications of recommendation 1 are reflected then in the proposed revisions for paragraph 33 of the operational directives to set the annual number of nominations that can be treated at no more than 60, as was explained in that recommendation. And at the same time, the annual sealing of files should be considered in light of the prioritization system, which is established by paragraph 34, and for which amendments are also proposed, because as emphasized by the working group's recommendation 4, it is proposed to formalize what is commonly called the priority 0 category, whereby at least one file per submitting state should be processed every 2-year period. Recommendation 7 of the working group, confirming the composition and working methods of the evaluation body, is reflected in paragraph 27, and according to which the evaluation body is no longer, quote, on an experimental basis as it was done in 2014. Recommendation 2 on moving the examination of international assistance requests to the Bureau of the Committee does, Mr. Chair, require a little bit of explanation. And you will read it you can see it in the document. With the changes proposed by the working group, there are 5 different types of international assistance. And they are explained through the revisions to paragraph 22, 27, 30, 33, 35, and 54 of the operational directives. However, the specific provisions mentioned under recommendation 2 need to be understood to refer to international assistance requests submitted using the form ICH 04. That is to say, international assistance requests up to the amount of $100,000, as well as those for emergency situations. And there will be no more standalone requests for an amount higher than $100,000 that used to be approved by the committee, and they will all be dealt with, all those standalone requests will be dealt with by the Bureau with a cap of $100,000. However, international assistance requests combined with a nomination to the urgent safeguarding list, as well as was established by the working group in its earlier sessions, and the international assistance requests in the context of the transfer of an element from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list, will continue to be examined because they are considered as part of the evaluation of a single file. And that is why it is proposed to leave those 2 specific international assistance requests, those which are combined with the urgent safeguarding list inscription, to the evaluation body to evaluate and for the committee to examine and approve. And emergency assistance and preparatory assistance will continue, as is the case, to be examined and approved by the Bureau. You can see then that the proposed revisions are presented in 2 colors in Annex 2 of Document 4, and that is because the proposals related to the recommendations made by Part 3 meeting of the working group are presented with underlines for new additions and strike-throughs for deletions. Some of these revisions impact the provisions in 2 paragraphs, those are paragraphs 22 and 30, relating to recommendations made by Part 1 and Part 2, and which are already endorsed by the 16th session of the committee, and those are indicated in grey in the annex. In other words, those grey parts of the annex are not meant for discussion by this extraordinary session of the committee, because they were already discussed and recommended by the committee at its 16th session last December. Please also allow me to point out that in addition to the revisions that are proposed to be reflected in the operational directives, the working group made recommendations that could be implemented in other ways and do not necessarily need revisions of the operational directives. For instance, recommendation 3 on the staffing requirements of the Secretariat is to be presented to the governing bodies of the Convention and possibly for discussion in the broader UNESCO context. In the same way, recommendation 8 on the removal of files from the backlog does not imply amendments to the operational directives. This is also the case of recommendation 11, which considers that any exceptional case that increased the annual ceiling shall be reviewed by the committee after initial discussions by the Bureau. Furthermore, the working group has invited the Secretariat to recommend possible criteria to define such cases, as was previously mentioned by the chair of the working group. Recommendations 5 and 6 concerning transfers and extensions in relation to the sealing of files, which are still on an experimental basis, can be dealt with through the decisions of the governing bodies, notably the General Assembly and the Committee. And Recommendation 10 concerns the next reflection on good safeguarding in Article 18 of the Convention, and Recommendation 12 is a commentary on the effectiveness of the dialogue process, which in fact has already been incorporated into the operational directives at the last session of the General Assembly. So if this extraordinary session of this committee so recommends, the amendments amendments to the operational directives that correspond to the recommendations made by Part 3 of the working group meeting will be presented to the General Assembly next week, together, of course, with those recommendations by Part 1 and Part 2 of the working group. And that is why they're presented as a package to see the whole package that will go to the General Assembly. But of course, as I said, those in grey are those that have already been discussed by the committee, and the other ones are for the discussion of this extraordinary session relating to Part 3. With that, and I apologize for the rather lengthy explanations, thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Tim, for your detailed presentation. At this stage, let me invite the committee members to express their opinions. Given the complex nature of the proposed amendments, I propose to debate chapter by chapter of the operation directives. We will start with chapter I.7 on the submission of files. We will debate paragraph 22. So I think that Kuwait would like to take the floor, to be followed by Switzerland. The floor is yours, Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and good morning to all our colleagues, committee members, observers, and congratulations for the election of the chairperson. And also let me take this opportunity to thank His Excellency, the Ambassador of Japan, for the constructive, patient, very fruitful discussion that led us to this, the document in front of us. And truly, after looking at it, it reflects what we discussed. Just, I would also like to thank the Secretariat for the report. Before we go to the Annex 2, Your Excellency, I was looking, the report in paragraph 7B. And I think, that's, reflects what says Mr. Tim reflecting for the international assistant. I just want to, remind our colleagues, in our discussion, and I want to thank them to bring that point, because truly that, we did not discuss it or did not mention it, but I think, what we see in front of us is should be reflected in the correct manner or in the international assistant. We agreed as a committee member that, there is no, there's $100,000 cap goes through the Bureau for standalone files. But we did not look at, what we have combined files and what's in front of us. I think that's, the existing and should be maintained in the same way, which is, if you have an international assistant within the nomination file, it goes to through the evaluation body, to the committee. So as a Kuwait, we think, this is the correct addition. And we have, I think, this is reflect the discussion and covered all, the items that we discussed. With that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. La parole est à la Suisse, qui sera suivie de la Tchéquie.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
On vous entend très bien, Madame l'Ambassadeur. Bonjour.
J'essaye de mettre ma caméra, mais ça n'a pas l'air de marcher. Donc, je vais parler.
Oui.
Voilà. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. C'est la première fois que je prends la parole. Donc, j'aimerais vous saluer vous-même et vous féliciter, ainsi que tous les collègues qui participent. En fait, j'ai une intervention de nature générale à faire et non pas chapitre par chapitre, hein. Mais ça ne va pas être très long, donc je vais la faire. J'aimerais tout d'abord remercier le groupe de travail, évidemment son président et le secrétariat pour le travail mené dans le cadre des réflexions sur les mécanismes d'inscription sur les listes de la Convention. Et bien sûr, de grands remerciements au gouvernement du Japon qui a apporté son précieux soutien à ce travail de réforme important. Alors, tout simplement, nous aimerions saluer les résultats obtenus par ce groupe de travail à composition non limitée qui réussit à présenter des propositions constructives, équilibrées de révision des règles de procédure. Et nous pensons que du fait de sa composition non limitée, nous considérons que les propositions du groupe de travail reflètent un large consensus. Donc, la Suisse soutient l'ensemble des propositions et révisions telles que proposées et nous appelons aussi le comité à faire de même et à ne pas rouvrir un débat de fond qui a déjà eu lieu. En effet, avec l'adoption de la troisième partie, nous disposons maintenant d'une révision solide et convaincante des directives opérationnelles que nous pouvons transmettre telles quelles à l'Assemblée générale. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, Madame l'ambassadeur. Et je partage complètement votre avis, évidemment, et celui de mon collègue, Monsieur l'ambassadeur Adam Moulin du Koweït, effectivement. Et encore une fois, ça me donne l'occasion de remercier sincèrement l'ambassadeur Oike pour ce formidable travail, bien sûr, et vous tous, évidemment, qui y avez participé. C'est un travail, comme vous le savez, qui a duré presque 2 années, travail long. Il a fallu beaucoup de patience, beaucoup d'échanges, beaucoup d'interactions entre vous et la présidence. Et finalement, nous arrivons à ce résultat qui, j'espère, satisfera tout le monde. Mais évidemment, bien sûr, les membres du comité sont souverains dans leurs décisions. Et évidemment, ce sera à eux de trancher par rapport aux propositions de réforme qui sont présentées. Je passe la parole maintenant à la République tchèque, qui sera suivie du Brésil et puis ensuite du Japon. La parole est à vous, République tchèque.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Also, our delegation would like to thank Japan for its generous contribution, the chairperson of the open-ended working group for excellent guidance, and the secretariat and all experts, as well as members of the open-ended working group, for all their work, which has led to finalization of the second part of the revision of the existing listing mechanism. The set of proposed revisions that we are going to endorse today is mostly of practical nature and should further improve the work and results of the convention. We strongly believe that those recommendations which have not been transformed into amendments of the operational directives will also be implemented successfully. We hope that the committee is ready to recommend the draft amendments of the operational directives as they are to the General Assembly, because the debates behind them have been rich and long. All states parties had a chance to discuss them and they represent a large consensus. So we are happy with the results and we support the wording of the draft amendments. Thank you.
Merci infiniment, la République tchèque. La parole maintenant est au Brésil, qui sera suivi du Japon.
Thank you, Mr. Chan, and thank you for and congratulations for your election. Brazil would like to thank the Japanese government for supporting this fundamental reflection for the sustainable development of our convention. We fully support the consensus achieved by the working group on this subject, but would like to stress that in our point of view, the 20th anniversary of our convention calls for substantial reflections that extend beyond the reform of the listing mechanisms in order we can achieve new balances towards the full and equitable implementation of the convention. In our reflection exercise on cultural conventions, the search for new balances, both geographical and thematic, has been a major objective for Brazil. Regarding the 2003 convention, it means, among other things, the strengthening of the register of good safeguarding practices. Much attention has been dedicated to the representative list at the expense of other issues that perhaps could be equally or even more urgent to address. Just to give an example, The representative list currently has over than 500 registered elements from 135 countries. The rest of good practice contains a relatively small number of inscriptions, 29 belonging to just 26 countries. To sum up our position, we are totally comfortable with the proposals coming from the working group, and we are even more optimistic on the proposals that will probably arise from the forthcoming working group to reflect on a broader implementation of Article 18 of the Convention. Brazil thanks Sweden for the support to this reflection. We hope that in this new working group, we can prioritize strategies to strengthen public awareness about good safeguarding practice as a path to achieve a better balance among the listing mechanisms. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup le Brésil, mais nous vous entendions très très bien. Merci pour vos propositions et votre évaluation de ce que pourrait à l'avenir être cette convention et les évolutions qu'elle doit pouvoir intégrer. Je vous en remercie infiniment. Je passe la parole maintenant au Japon, qui sera suivi des Pays-Bas. La parole est au Japon. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Japan would like to commend the Secretariat and all the state parties for the effort that has been made to organize the three parts of the open-ended working group, and we are delighted by its constructive outcome. We believe especially that future enforcement of the Secretariat in human resources and financially will strengthen the listing mechanism and therefore encourage community for further protecting their living heritage. We support entirely the working group result, and we hope that it will be endorsed and proposed to the General Assembly as it is. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup le Japon pour votre soutien. Je donne la parole aux Pays-Bas qui seront suivis de la Pologne. Les Pays-Bas, merci.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your election. We also would like to thank the Secretariat and the Ambassador of Japan for all the work they put into preparing and chairing the working groups. The Netherlands appreciates the use of this open-ended method, wherein everybody has the possibility to join the discussions. I won't make a remark on the separate paragraphs. We respect the extensive work of the open-ended working group and are happy with the results. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup les Pays-Bas pour votre intervention. Je donne la parole maintenant à la Pologne, qui sera suivie du Kazakhstan. La Pologne, Madame l'ambassadeur, je vous en prie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. Mr. Chair, congratulations on your election. And I have to say that it's a very good day for us today. We have managed to fulfill all our mandate as a working group. As the open-ended working group, and on that, in that sense, I would like to thank very much the government of Japan for its great contribution, which allow us all to work on the very important revision of the listing mechanism. I also would like to thank Secretariat and the chair of the open-ended working group himself for a brilliant and negotiating skills and his guidance that led us to finish all our discussions in a very great result. I also would like to thank the Bureau members and all the committee members and the state parties to the conventions for a brilliant discussions, very long-term negotiations, big arguments sometimes, but then at the end, a great consensus on the list of recommendations that we have in front of us today, which will enable the whole international system of the intangible cultural heritage protection to work more effectively. By saying that, I hope that our today's decision will create a new chapter in the international intangible cultural heritage protection, and we will start to implement now what we have decided to recommend
to the General Assembly and try to work better together for the sake of the convention and for the sake of the protection of the intangible cultural heritage around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup la Pologne, merci pour votre soutien, pour votre engagement, et je m'adresse à travers vous à l'ensemble des membres du comité. Il y a, et on le voit ce matin, un large consensus autour du fait de reconnaître le travail exceptionnel qui a été fait par ce groupe de travail, et à sa tête l'ambassadeur Oike, que je remercie encore une fois, et je remercie à travers lui le gouvernement du Japon pour son soutien financier, c'est important. Et je pense que notre convention est en train de prendre, et on le voit à travers les discussions, et l'engagement de beaucoup, de plus en plus d'importance dans le paysage de l'UNESCO, dans le paysage des conventions, et on en parlait tout à l'heure, et il faut se préparer effectivement au cours des années à venir, à voir cette convention de 2003 de prendre de plus en plus d'importance, et puis s'adapter évidemment pour pouvoir en assurer une très très bonne et une meilleure mise en œuvre. Mais en tout cas, nous avons déjà franchi de grands pas à travers les recommandations qui ont été faites par ce groupe de travail, et je vous en remercie encore une fois infiniment. Je donne la parole maintenant au Kazakhstan, qui sera suivi du Botswana. Le Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everybody. Dear Mr. Chairman, since this is first intervention of our delegation, let me express to Ambassador Samir Dare our sincere congratulations on your chairing. We believe that your competence and experience will safely navigate our extraordinary session caravan to reach the desired destination, inshallah. We would like also to express thanks to the government of Japan for its generous commitment in supporting the work of the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group. And special thanks to Ambassador Atsuki Oiki-san for his patient, inspiring, and constructive manner of convening the group work, which resulted in reviewing documents. Arigato. We should also express compliments to the diligent and efficient Secretariat work led by Mr. Tim Curtis. My delegation supports the proposal of Switzerland and some other delegates not to reopen the debate since the recent discussion of the committee. My delegation will express its comments for proposed recommendations and amendments in accordance with the proposed agenda and agreed procedure. I just want to make some general adding. Ladies and gentlemen, the delegate of Brazil reminded us about the coming convention anniversary. This year, Kazakhstan marks the decade of accession to the UNESCO Convention 2003. I am glad to inform you that Kazakhstan National Post Agency already issued the ordinary post stamp on this occasion to be used in most common occasion by most of population who send mail by post in Kazakhstan. And another special and picturesque postmark will mark the 20th anniversary of the Convention 2003. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup le Kazakhstan. Je donne la parole maintenant au Botswana qui sera suivi de la Chine. Monsieur l'ambassadeur du Botswana, la parole est à vous.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought by remaining silent, I would, as it would be assumed that I too support the colleagues that have spoken before me. But I thought perhaps I should also register that support and congratulate you, Chair, on your election for this extraordinary session and with the way you are conducting the meeting. I would also like to join colleagues to congratulate Ambassador of Japan for his able leadership of the open-ended working group and for the achievements that they made. And also to congratulate and thank his government for its generous support of the process. And of course, last but not least, to thank Tim and his colleagues at the Secretariat for the good work they put in and continue to put in. And we hope, Chair, that we will be given the opportunity, as colleagues have already mentioned before me, for us to comment individually. I have comments, for instance, under the options, as well as the evaluation body and international assistance. And I hope that we will be given that opportunity to make those comments. Thank you very much, Chair.
Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Évidemment, bien sûr, vous aurez l'occasion de vous exprimer le moment venu par rapport à la question des organes d'évaluation, si vous avez des commentaires. Je donne la parole à la Chine, qui sera suivie de l'Arabie saoudite. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. China. It seems that there is a connection problem, or...
Is it Saudi Arabia's turn, Your Excellency?
China's back.
Okay, China is back. Okay, the floor is yours, China.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry for the technical problem, just a little bit, the disconnection. My delegation would first of all to extend our congratulations on your election as the chair of this extraordinary session of the committee. And also we would like to thank again for the Ambassador of Japan for his excellent chairing of the working group on the reflection of the listing mechanism for all the 3 rounds of the working group meetings. And we also appreciate very much for all of the working group members for their gracious and valuable inputs, which leads to the very constructive results of the recommendations to the committee. And we would like to thank the Secretariat for their tremendous efforts in preparing for this extraordinary session and working out this document for the possible revision on the operational directives. My delegation fully appreciates all the efforts and also very much welcoming all the proposals to which will be finally presented to the 9th General Assembly next week. But before that, my delegation would like to have some points to be clarified by the Secretariat regarding to some paragraphs of the revisions, which does not mean any possible revisions to the wording, but just need some clarifications. If you may, Mr. Chair, I would like to refer to the form ICH 06 form, which used to be applied for the request for the international assistance for the best safeguarding practices. And also my question regards to the paragraph 47, which we would like to be clarified, since we are not very sure this paragraph is consistent to the recommendation by the working group, which is number 2, recommendation number 2. So we just need some further clarifications, if you may, from the Secretariat. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, la Chine. Si vous le permettez, évidemment, je donnerai la parole au secrétariat pour vous répondre, évidemment, par rapport aux clarifications et aux précisions que vous souhaitiez avoir. Je donne la parole maintenant à l'Arabie saoudite, qui sera suivie du Cameroun, puis de la Suède. L'Arabie saoudite, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your elections. We're very happy to see you today, and we're looking forward for a successful ICH committee meeting in Morocco. Dear Mr. Chair, I would like first to start by thanking the Secretariat for the diligent work that they undertook. And I would like also to thank all member states who participated wholeheartedly in this discussion. We shared a common goal and we have achieved it. And of course, most importantly, I would like to thank Japan. The government of Japan for its very, very generous contribution and also their beautiful in-kind contribution by providing the wise, the smart, the diligent chair, the ambassador of Japan, who led this discussion very wisely and very patiently until we reached this recommendation. We call for the adoption of this recommendation as it is. It reflected effectively the discussion that took place, and hopefully all the questions can be answered so we can take it forward to the General Assembly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your support. And of course, I have the same wish that you have just mentioned about the explanations that China has asked for, so we can move on without reopening the debates over the issues. The floor is given to Cameroon, who will be followed by Sweden. Cameroon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner la parole. Je voudrais vous féliciter, Monsieur le Président, pour votre élection. Et je voudrais également saisir cette occasion pour remercier le Japon pour sa contribution, sa généreuse contribution, qui a permis d'améliorer notre convention. Car comme vous le savez, la convention de 2003 a une importance particulière pour les communautés dans nos pays parce qu'elle touche aux questions d'identité et touche aux questions de valeurs. Or, tout ce qu'une communauté a de plus cher, ce sont ses valeurs. Nous voulons également remercier le secrétariat pour tout ce qu'il fait pour soutenir le travail par rapport à cette convention et remercier le groupe de travail et son président, remercier également les membres du comité qui ont participé dans le cadre de ce groupe de travail ouvert. Le caractère ouvert nous permet également de prendre connaissance des principes même qui président à cette convention et de renforcer nos capacités quant à la compréhension holistique qu'on peut avoir de ces orientations-là. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Nous soutenons bien évidemment le travail qui a été fait en espérant que des clarifications de la part du secrétariat viennent tout simplement renforcer ce qui a déjà été recommandé et adopté collectivement. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, le Cameroun, pour votre soutien et évidemment les questions que vous avez posées, ou du moins les demandes de clarification sont tout à fait légitimes et évidemment le secrétariat y répondra avec beaucoup de plaisir. Je passe la parole maintenant à la Suède qui sera suivie de l'Azerbaïdjan. Sweden, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your election. Sweden has been an active part in the reflecting process, and we would like to thank the government of Japan and especially Ambassador Oki for successfully chairing the meetings. We would also like to commend the Secretariat for their excellent work and their very clear explanations here today. We know how much time, negotiations and considerations that lies behind these proposals, and Sweden supports the statements from the many colleagues here today asking to adopt the proposed provisions as a whole, and we look forward to the decision and also the discussions here today. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup la Suède pour votre soutien et pour vos encouragements. Je passe la parole maintenant à l'Azerbaïdjan, qui sera suivi du Sri Lanka. Je voudrais juste signaler qu'il y a une demande de parole de la part de la Palestine. Je leur donnerai la parole après les explications qui seront fournies par M. Curtis, juste après les demandes de parole des membres du comité. Voilà, la parole est à l'Azerbaïdjan. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, la parole est à vous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. First of all, I would like to, as we take the floor for the first time, I would like to congratulate you on the election and also the Bureau members. I also would like to appreciate the work done by the Secretariat, and would like to commend and congratulate Ambassador of Japan for his leadership throughout the chairing the open-ended working group, as well as the generous support of the government of Japan. And as you have mentioned, Mr. Chairperson, 2 years of hard work that we went through, and we believe that all this hard work through the constructive discussions were quite quite clearly reflected in the proposals. And we, in general, welcome the proposals, and we look forward to have excellent relations throughout the upcoming meeting. Thank you.
Merci infiniment, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, pour votre soutien. Et je sais évidemment que, comme tous les autres membres du comité, vous avez été extrêmement présents lors des discussions dans le cadre du groupe de travail. Effectivement, c'est le résultat d'un travail commun, collectif que nous présentons aujourd'hui. Et j'espère que nous pourrons, à la fin de cette session, l'adopter sans trop de problèmes. Je passe la parole au Koweït, pardon, parce que nous n'avions pas vu la demande de parole de Monsieur l'ambassadeur du Koweït, qui sera suivi du Sri Lanka et du Rwanda. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Kuwait.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry taking the floor again. Mr. Chair, I took the floor, the first one, when you opened the debate to discuss paragraph 22. And after hearing, from our colleague as a committee members, I think, it was positive, and they are, welcoming, and agreeing, what we have in front of us reflects, the discussion. So if you may allow me, Mr. Chair, after the clarification, that was requested by member states, after the clarification of Secretariat, and if the member states satisfied with this clarification, we adopt the whole paragraphs as a whole. So then we can move forward and, use the time, efficiently. So my suggestion is to, once the clarification was satisfied with all members, we approve it as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur. Je connais votre efficacité et votre esprit toujours constructif. Je vous en remercie infiniment. Merci encore. La parole est au Sri Lanka, qui sera suivi du Rwanda. Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Chair. As Sri Lanka is taking the floor for the first time, I would like to congratulate you for your day's work. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Japan for their support, and especially the permanent delegate of Japan, Ambassador Oike, for all his hard work and steering the open-ended working group in the right direction. And also, we would like to thank the Secretariat and all the contributors who made these recommendations seen through. And Sri Lanka is looking forward for today's deliberations. Thank you very much.
Merci infiniment, le Sri Lanka, et je saisis l'occasion pour vous féliciter pour la dernière session que nous avons vécue, qui était exceptionnelle. Soyez-en remerciés. J'espère que la 17e sera aussi fluide et aussi douce que la 16e. Merci beaucoup. Je donne la parole au Rwanda.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellences, chers collègues, Mesdames et Messieurs, étant donné que c'est également la première fois que je prends la parole, je tiens à vous féliciter, Monsieur le Président, le Secrétariat, pour l'organisation et la tenue de cette session extraordinaire du Comité intergouvernemental de sauvegarde du patrimoine culturel immatériel. Félicitons le bureau nouvellement élu et leur souhaitons plein succès dans leur mission à venir. Donc, félicitons le secrétariat et l'ensemble du groupe de travail intergouvernemental à composition non limitée qui ont participé à l'élaboration du document présentant les recommandations dans le cadre de la réflexion globale sur les mécanismes d'inscription sur les listes de la Convention. Je vous remercie et je reprendrai la parole bien plus tard. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, pour votre soutien. Je donne la parole maintenant au secrétariat pour fournir les explications et les clarifications demandées par certains États membres. Et puis, je donnerai ensuite la parole à la Palestine. Monsieur Curtis, la parole est à vous.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. And if you don't mind, I'll answer in English just to make sure I say the correct things. I thank all the comments and all the acknowledgement of all the committee members who've spoken. And I think there were two questions which were asked by China and endorsed by some other countries, Cameroon. And indeed, I can fully understand the need for some small clarification. I'll start with the first one on Form ICH 06. It really is quite simply that the Form ICH 06 now becomes Form ICH 05. So that is all the preparatory assistance requests come under one form, and this is a simplification of procedures with the view to lightening, if you will, a little bit the workload. But it is also because there's one less form, which is the standalone international assistance request, which used to be either under 100,000 or over 100,000, is now just one form under 100,000. So ICH 06 is now ICH 05. I hope that answers the question. And concerning paragraph 47, indeed, this is what I explained in the opening, and I believe the delegate of Kuwait also referenced it. When we took the recommendations, it did say that all international assistance requests were to be examined by the Bureau. And in fact, this was a slight contradiction with, for instance, a recommendation of an earlier working group, an earlier part of the working group, which requested that transfers from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list could also be accompanied by an international assistance request. Furthermore, we have a procedure now where a submission for urgent safeguarding listing can be accompanied at the same time by an international assistance request. Now, in these cases, and this was not really discussed during the working group in any detail, but in these cases, those files are just one file. The international assistance is not taking up an extra space in the ceiling. And therefore, we considered that in order to be consistent with the recommendations of Part A or B, and I can't remember if it was A or B of the working group, we allowed for that provision for the international assistance request, those that are combined with the request to the urgent safeguarding list, or those that come in the what will be the new mechanism for transferring from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding lists. And the logic, of course, I repeat, is that they do not take up a space within the quota. That remains one file. Those, therefore, are proposed to continue to go to the evaluation body and the committee. I hope that that clarifies why that paragraph 47 is drafted the way it is, and also the issue of ICH 06. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Tim. J'espère que les explications fournies auront satisfait la Chine et le Cameroun, mais de toute façon, évidemment, s'il y a une demande de parole, je la redonnerai. Je voudrais maintenant me tourner vers la Palestine, donner la parole à Monsieur l'ambassadeur de Palestine. La parole est à vous, Monsieur l'ambassadeur.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et félicitations pour votre élection. Je souhaite simplement, et très rapidement, je ne vais pas prendre beaucoup de temps, dire à quel point ce travail est important pour améliorer la mise en œuvre de notre convention. Et ce travail, tous on sait, c'est grâce à la contribution généreuse du gouvernement du Japon, que je remercie sincèrement, et the leadership of the president of the working group, Ambassador Oike. I can't say better words than what has been said by our colleagues. Very able leadership indeed, and very diplomat. It was a difficult task, but he brought it really to a very good end. And the proof is that all members of the committee approved the recommendation of the working group. Personally, I think this work is exemplary and is very important. And here, I would like to pay tribute to the diligence of the Secretariat, who is delivering a very, very difficult work. We forget, maybe sometimes we see them with us and we forget that they are preparing other meetings and they are preparing other cycle for the files with the evaluation body and so on. So we know how much they are efficient. Nevertheless, I have just a very small remark. I didn't want to raise it before because I was thinking about it. Still, we need to think about it. Only the appellation when we talk about exceptional cases, les cas exceptionnels. Exceptional, it includes, of course, emergency cases, but it could go beyond emergencies. So I think that we need to keep in mind using the word emergency procedure to get a little bit inspired by the 72 Convention. I don't say that we need to copy and paste the emergency procedure from 72 Convention, but just rather using the word and keeping the recommendation as it is for the moment. And as it has been said, in any case, it is a dynamic issue. In the future, we will see how these recommendations are implemented and how it contributes to the better implementation of the convention, especially regarding the mechanisms on the list. But this question of emergency procedure, I think that we need to keep it in mind for the future. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and we are looking forward to our 17th session in Rabat. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Et évidemment, je vous remercie d'abord pour le soutien et puis, bien sûr, pour d'avoir nourri un peu la réflexion pour ce qui nous attend à l'avenir. Et vous avez parfaitement raison de susciter cette question des cas exceptionnels, des situations d'urgence. Et effectivement, comme nous l'avons fait pour la Convention de 72, il est important probablement que nous réunissions un autre groupe de travail pour pouvoir se pencher de manière effective et efficace sur ces questions-là, parce qu'elles sont d'une extrême importance. En tout cas, je vous remercie infiniment, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, et je passe la parole au Cameroun qui souhaite s'exprimer.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Cameroun voudrait simplement revenir à soulever juste l'équivoque. Nous n'avons pas posé de questions par rapport à celle qui a été soulevée par l'auguste délégué de Chine. Nous soutenons le travail qui a été fait parce que sur ce sujet des demandes d'assistance, nous avions déjà fait des démarches auprès du secrétariat qui nous avait clarifié effectivement dans quel cadre on pouvait solliciter l'assistance. Donc, nous soutenons le travail qui a été fait entièrement. Simplement, on pensait que ces clarifications-là n'allaient pas ouvrir un autre débat. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Je remercie le Cameroun et je vous rassure, j'avais très bien compris que vous souteniez évidemment les recommandations qui ont été proposées à l'issue de ce groupe de travail. Y a-t-il une demande de prise de parole? Je n'en vois pas, donc j'imagine que les clarifications et les explications fournies par le secrétariat ont été suffisantes et acceptables pour la Chine. Donc, je propose qu'on passe directement peut-être à l'adoption du draft dans sa globalité, j'imagine, puisqu'il y a un large consensus autour des recommandations présentées. Donc, j'aimerais que l'on affiche le projet de décision 5.ext.com 4. Et je demande, and I ask the committee to adopt this draft decision as shown on the screens. If there is no... Je ne vois pas de demande de prise de parole. J'attends que le projet défile dans son entièreté afin que les membres puissent en prendre connaissance de manière claire et complète. Donc, je pense que nous pouvons adopter cette décision. Adoptée. Merci beaucoup. Et je voulais en profiter encore une fois à l'issue de cette adoption. D'abord, vous remercier tous infiniment pour cet esprit constructif dont vous avez fait preuve et qui a évidemment marqué toute la durée des travaux de ce groupe de travail. Et encore une fois, un immense merci à l'ambassadeur Oike pour son leadership, pour sa patience, pour son engagement, pour sa subtilité diplomatique qui nous a amenés à ce résultat. Et évidemment, remercier le secrétariat, parce que sans le secrétariat, nous n'aurions pas pu avancer et obtenir les résultats auxquels nous sommes parvenus. Donc, je nous félicite et je vous félicite tous pour cette adoption. Merci infiniment. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Donc là, nous passons... Nous passons maintenant au 5e point, si vous le permettez, de notre ordre du jour, qui est la demande d'examen de la candidature de la culture de la préparation du borscht ukrainien par l'Ukraine en tant que cas d'extrême urgence. Je vous invite à consulter les documents 5, le document 5, donc LHE/22.5.ext.com/5, qui fournit de plus amples informations. Je demanderai aussi à Tim, s'il vous plaît, de nous expliquer un peu le contexte concernant ce point. La parole est à vous, Tim. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you. And thank you, dear committee members. We are presented now with an item which came to us following a request by Ukraine on the 21st of April 2022 to inscribe the nomination Culture of Ukrainian Borscht Cooking on the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding as a case of extreme urgency and in reference to Article 17.3 of the 2003 Convention. The nomination dossier had originally been submitted by Ukraine using Form ICH-02 in March 2021 for possible inscription on the representative list of the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity. But then, due to the ongoing armed conflict, Ukraine made the request for this nomination to be treated as soon as possible and as a case of extreme urgency in reference to the provision 17.3 of the 2003 Convention. And this is indeed the first time that such a request has been treated and presented to the committee in the implementation of the Convention. So in accordance with paragraphs 1 and 32 of the operational directives, this initiated a process whereby the Bureau set out a step-by-step procedure to treat the request on an accelerated basis. Allow me to summarize, therefore, the key points briefly, as they are also reflected in the working document. On 6th of May, the Bureau met to consider the request and establish the procedure to treat it. Ukraine was subsequently invited to submit any additional information to that which had been previously provided, and in particular as regards the inscription criteria U2B and U6. The Secretariat then consolidated that additional information, which was received on the 14th and 15th of June, and compiled it into a composite nomination dossier. The main part of the nomination dossier was a letter from the Minister of Culture, as well as the newly submitted form ICH 01, corresponding to inscription requests on the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. These forms and these dossiers are, of course, available from the web page dedicated to this extraordinary session of the committee. This nomination was evaluated then by the 2022 evaluation body during their June meeting, and in fact precisely on the 20th of June, using the same working method as other files in the 2022 cycle. The evaluation body finalized their recommendation on the 21st of June, the next day, again mainly basing it on the information that was submitted in the new form ICH 01, and this recommendation was then transferred to the Bureau for its meeting on the 23rd of June. The Bureau concluded that based on the recommendation of the evaluation body, the case indeed should be considered to constitute a case of extreme urgency in the sense of Article 17.3. The Bureau underscored the importance of bringing this request to the committee as soon as possible, as is stipulated in paragraph 32 of the operational directives. And to this end, the Bureau requested the Secretariat to initiate an electronic exchange with committee members to seek at least 2/3 of the committee members to agree to include this request in this 5th extraordinary session of the committee. And following the electronic consultation, which took place between the 23rd and the 28th of June of this year, more than 2/3 of the committee members agreed with the Bureau's proposal to bring this request to the attention of the present extraordinary session. In fact, there were no objections of any committee members. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Tim, for this clear presentation. Conformément à notre pratique habituelle pour l'examen des candidatures aux listes de la Convention, je voudrais maintenant inviter le représentant de l'organe d'évaluation pour l'année 2022 à présenter ses conclusions au comité. Je crois comprendre que le rapporteur, M. Kirk Siang Yeo, de Singapour, commencera la présentation, qui sera suivie par celle du président de l'organe pour ce cycle, M. Pierluigi Petrillo de l'Italie. La parole est à M. Siang Yeo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Following the decision by the Bureau meeting on the 6th of May, the evaluation body was formally requested on the 13th of May 2022 to examine the nomination Culture of Ukrainian Borscht Cooking as a case of extreme urgency for the urgent safeguarding list in reference to Article 17.3 of the Convention. The request was included in the agenda of the second meeting of the 2022 evaluation body, which took place in Presencia in Paris at UNESCO HQ from 20th to 25th of June 2022. The Secretariat made the nomination dossier available online to the evaluation body through its dedicated monitoring interface on the 16th of June this year. It was explained to the evaluation body that the Secretariat had received the additional information on the nomination form from Ukraine, an additional letter on the 14th of June this year, and the form ICH 01 with photos received on 15th of June 2022. These were included as information to constitute a composite nomination dossier presented in a booklet format. The evaluation body undertook individual evaluations between the 16th and 19th of June this year and provided written evaluations through the online interface. The file was then discussed during the meeting on its first day on the 20th of June, following the same working method used for evaluating the files of the 2022 cycle. During its deliberations, the evaluation body assessed the nomination against each of the required criteria for inscription to the urgent safeguarding list, with specific consideration of inscription criteria U2B and U6 to arrive at a consensus. The draft decision was prepared overnight on the 20th of June by the rapporteur, myself. The draft was then reviewed by the evaluation body during the second day of its meeting on the 21st of June. The draft decision was finalized by the evaluation body during the same meeting and subsequently validated by the chairperson that same day. Through these exceptional efforts and under extremely tight deadlines, the evaluation body was able to complete a full evaluation of the file on an accelerated basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I now pass the floor to the chairperson of the evaluation body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Chairperson. Ukrainian borscht is a traditional dish that is served at social events, holidays, and rituals as an expression of hospitality and inclusion. The specific ingredients vary according to the region, season, occasion, and cooking method, and the practice is based on within families, with the children participating in the preparation. Loaded in tales, folk songs, and proverbs, Ukrainian borscht is viewed as a lifestyle and identity marker, an integral part of Ukrainian heritage that reflects the country's value and beliefs. Please allow me to go through the main conclusion of our evaluation. On criteria 1, 4, 5, the evaluation body found that the nomination responded to the criteria required. The body took particular care to look at criterion U2B, and there our conclusion is that the nomination file demonstrates the various factors related to the ongoing armed conflict that threaten the viability of the element and its transmission. The displacement of people and viewers threatens the element, as people are unable not only to cook or grow local vegetables for borscht, but also to come together to practice the element, which undermines the social and cultural well-being of community. As such, the transmission of the element is also threatened. The armed conflict also destroyed the environment, fauna, and flora. Importantly, the armed conflict leads to the loss of the everyday context associated with practices the element, and thus significantly affected the holding of cultural events, in particular festivals dedicated to traditional food, including borscht. All of these factors justify the need for urgent safeguarding of the element as a case of extreme urgency. In that sense, our recommendation is that the existence of the soup itself is not under immediate threat, but that the living heritage that is associated with borscht is facing immediate threat, because people's ability to practice and transmit their intangible cultural heritage has been severely disrupted due to the armed conflict and forced displacement of communities. Related to criterion U3, the evaluation body considers that safeguarding plan proposed is extensive and coherent, but it's necessary to monitor the implementation considering the current state of crisis. The body therefore recommends that the state party revise the safeguarding plan according to the ever-evolving context of the armed conflict and then report back to the committee in 2023. Criterion U6 focuses on the necessary consultation with the state party regarding the description of the element in conformity with Article 7.3 of the Convention. The request came from the State Party of Ukraine, which submitted that additional information following the request by the Bureau of the Committee. The evaluation body considers that the nomination meets criterion U6. Finally, the evaluation body recognized that the culture of borscht cooking is shared also with other communities in the region and included the reference to this in its recommendation. In conclusion, the evaluation body recommends that culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking be inscribed on the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding as a case of extreme urgency as stipulated in Article 17.3 of the Convention. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Merci, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Je voudrais, au nom du comité, remercier l'organe d'évaluation ainsi que son président et son rapporteur pour tous les grands efforts déployés pour évaluer la demande de l'Ukraine dans un temps relativement court. Je voudrais maintenant donner la parole, évidemment, aux membres du comité. Je vois la République tchèque qui sera suivie de la Suisse. La République tchèque, la parole est à vous.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Notre délégation apprécie la présentation de cette candidature pour la liste de sauvegarde urgente en tant que cas d'extrême urgence. Je tiens tout particulièrement à remercier l'organe d'évaluation pour son examen rapide et complète et d'une manière générale pour l'interaction efficace entre l'État partie, le secrétariat et l'organe d'évaluation pour ce premier cas d'utilisation de l'article 17.3 de la Convention. Nous sommes conscients de la situation difficile dans laquelle se trouve l'Ukraine depuis le mois de février et sont contents de pouvoir soutenir ces détenteurs du PCI, surtout dans une situation d'extrême urgence. La candidature de la culture de la préparation du borscht ukrainien est très bien conçue. Les informations additionnelles sont claires. Les experts l'ont évalué en étant en cas d'extrême urgence justifié. Les recommandations d'inscrire est positive car tous les critères ont été satisfaits et le processus d'utilisation de l'article 17.3 a été mis en œuvre de façon transparente depuis le début. C'est pourquoi notre délégation soutient l'inscription de cet élément. Nous espérons qu'après l'inscription, il sera possible de commencer à mettre en œuvre au moins certaines des mesures de sauvegarde rapidement et nous considérons cette candidature comme bon exemple d'utilisation de l'article 17.3 de la Convention pour les cas d'extrême urgence. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je vous remercie. Merci à la République tchèque. La parole maintenant est à la Suisse. Madame l'ambassadeur, la parole est à vous.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Avec cette candidature de la culture de la préparation du borscht ukrainien pour la liste de sauvegarde urgente en tant que cas d'extrême urgence, l'article 17.3 de la Convention est appliqué pour la première fois dans l'histoire de notre Convention. De manière générale, d'ailleurs, la Suisse aimerait rappeler l'importance du patrimoine culturel immatériel et de sa sauvegarde justement dans les situations d'urgence. Et notre Convention a mis en place ces mesures et lignes directrices pour répondre aux enjeux et apporter des réponses à la nécessité de préserver le patrimoine vivant lorsqu'il est en péril ou menacé. J'aimerais évidemment dire ici que le bureau et le secrétariat ont mis en œuvre la procédure de traitement prévue pour une extrême urgence. Celle-ci a été basée sur la coopération avec l'État soumissionnaire, sur l'expertise de l'organe d'évaluation et sur la transparence avec les États parties. Donc, nous aimerions féliciter le secrétariat ainsi que l'organe d'évaluation pour leur réactivité dans le traitement de cette demande. Et je remercie aussi maintenant l'organe d'évaluation et les deux experts qui nous ont présenté des informations ce matin. Donc, l'organe d'évaluation a formulé une recommandation d'inscription basée sur l'analyse d'un dossier complété et il a considéré que le dossier correspond à l'ensemble des critères et que la pratique et la transmission de cette tradition vivante sont menacées et se trouvent dans une situation d'extrême urgence. La Suisse soutient donc l'inscription sur la base de l'expertise fournie. J'aimerais aussi ici relayer les recommandations de l'organe d'évaluation à l'État soumissionnaire à adapter, à revoir le plan de sauvegarde présenté en fonction de l'évolution du contexte. Évidemment, les circonstances sont extrêmement difficiles, mais il nous paraît important que l'État soumissionnaire puisse poursuivre son effort de sauvegarde et nous en rendre compte au comité parce que cela nous permettra justement d'assurer le suivi de ce premier cas de sauvegarde d'un élément dans une situation d'extrême urgence. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, Madame l'ambassadeur. I have a request for the floor from the Republic of Korea to be followed by Poland. Korea, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for taking the chair of this important extraordinary session of this committee. Our delegation would like to appreciate Secretariat and the evaluation body for their efficient work done in timely manner during the whole reviewing process of this item. Considering the current dire situation in Ukraine, our delegation would like to recognize the extreme urgency of this Ukrainian tradition of borscht cooking under the article of 17.3 of the convention, and therefore support the inscription of the culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Korea. The floor to Poland. Poland, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Poland wishes, first of all, thank the Ukrainian delegation for presenting this file for the urgent safeguarding. We truly believe that the tradition of borscht cooking is indeed endangered and demands from us urgent and timely action to preserve and monitor what is going on with the element regarding the situation in the ground. Poland wishes also to commend the Secretariat and thank the evaluation body for their work and providing the committee with all the arguments and all their work that they have been presenting to us when it comes to the assessment of the nomination. I don't want to repeat all the arguments that have been raised by my colleagues, but I wanted to underline that we fully support the draft decision presented to the committee, and we hope that this decision will be adopted. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame l'ambassadeur. La parole maintenant est au Brésil, qui sera suivi du Cameroun. Le Brésil, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil would like to commend the Secretariat and the Bureau for the agile and professional manner in which it brought this topic to the discussion of the committee. We know that flexibility is one of the greatest assets of this convention, and in this regard, we believe that the new operational directives will bring even more accuracy and actuality for the benefit of our state parties. We would also like to congratulate the government of Ukraine for the very professional and detailed report. We particularly note that the report values the role of communities in line with the convention's text. If the 1972 World Heritage Convention is very much dedicated to states, the 2003 Convention is more oriented to societies. And it's very interesting to note how the two conventions complement each other to protect our heritage. In this sense, Ukraine's accurate and extensive report deserves Brazil's full support, once it highlights an element of intangible culture that is extremely important for social cohesion of Ukrainian communities. We are impressed to learn how borscht soup historically supported and united Ukrainian communities in difficult periods such as the Civil War, the Holodomor, and World War II. We are also glad to note the efforts of the Ukrainian government to safeguard this national symbol of resilience. Brazil believes that the description of the borscht cooking in the urgent safeguarding list will be an important contribute to these already ongoing efforts. Mr. Chair, among the millions of immigrants that Brazil was privileged to welcome in the 19th century, there is a significant Ukrainian community. There are, for example, in the Brazilian state of Paraná, communities that have more than 80% of their inhabitants of Ukrainian origin. In these communities, you can appreciate a bit of Ukrainian culture and even get a taste of the borscht soup. To conclude, I would like to recall a very famous sentence from the French philosopher Jean-Briat Savarin, published in the 19th century in his Physiology of Taste. Tell me what you eat and I will tell who you are. The motto is more current than ever. Food traditions of a territory have created the identification of cultures emerged there. Despite the irresistible process of globalization, cases as the Haitian Jumu soup and the Ukrainian borscht soup demonstrate that culinary traditions are in the core of cultural identities. And you can keep counting on Brazil to preserve the tastes, flavors, and culinary knowledge of the world. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup au Brésil. La parole maintenant est au Cameroun qui sera suivi des Pays-Bas. Le Cameroun, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner la parole à nouveau. Le Cameroun voudrait remercier l'Ukraine pour la candidature de cet élément en situation d'urgence. Et nous voulons également féliciter le secrétariat, le bureau du comité ainsi que l'organe d'évaluation au regard de la rapidité et la technicité avec laquelle ils ont travaillé, ils ont examiné puis traité pour que ce dossier soit prêt aujourd'hui et qu'on puisse l'examiner. Et nous voulons encore souligner ici l'importance de l'élément par rapport à la valeur identitaire et aux valeurs morales autour desquelles l'élément qui est présenté réunit les communautés par lesquelles les communautés se reconnaissent et qui entre bien dans le mandat de notre convention. Et au regard de ce que les éléments de procédure, de fond, par rapport aux dispositions de l'article 17.3 ont été vérifiés, le Cameroun souhaite soutenir véritablement l'inscription de cet élément. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, le Cameroun. Now I give the floor to the Netherlands. Netherlands, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the Secretariat for preparing this document. The Netherlands has always encouraged member states to make use of the opportunity of the urgent safeguarding list. The document shows that all the steps of the procedure are followed correctly, and we truly thank the evaluation body for their hard work. We highly respect the advice of the evaluation body and therefore support the inscription of the culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking. We recognize the urgent situation and hope this decision will be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netherlands. I have two more requests for the floor. One, Panama, to be followed by Japan. Panama tiene la palabra.
Thank you very much, Chair. Being this our first time, we would like to congratulate you for your election and for your job today. Our country believes that the procedure that has been done has all of the requisites of the convention, and we considered that the evaluation group has done a great job with the recommendations, which we are in accordance for the inscription of the soup in accordance with Article 17.3 of this convention. In the center of all of this, we need to consider that there are ethical principles that we need to take into consideration. These focus on the need to respect and recognize practices needed for the safeguarding of our ICH. Therefore, the delegation of Panama supports the inscription of the Ukrainian borch as established by our convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Panama. Now, I give the floor to Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat for its efficient and hard work. And secondly, I would like to thank the evaluation body for the hard work and good results. It seems that there is a consensus for the adoption of the draft decision as it is, and nobody spoke against it. And on that basis, we would be very happy to say that we want to add our voice to the support of this particular inscription. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Ça me fait plaisir de vous revoir aussi vite sur l'écran. Je ne vois pas d'autres demandes de parole. Donc, on pourrait directement passer à l'adoption de la décision. Je propose qu'on l'adopte dans sa globalité, à moins que, évidemment, les membres du comité souhaitent l'adopter paragraphe par paragraphe, mais je pense qu'il y a un large consensus qui se dégage et qu'on pourrait directement procéder à l'adoption de la décision dans sa globalité. Le secrétariat, est-ce que vous pourriez afficher le projet de décision, s'il vous plaît? C'est la décision 5.ext.com5. Et si vous pouviez la faire défiler, mais très lentement, afin que l'ensemble des membres du comité puissent la voir dans sa globalité. Merci beaucoup au secrétariat. Je m'adresse maintenant aux membres du comité. Pourrions-nous adopter cette décision dans sa globalité? Je ne vois pas de demande de parole, donc je considère que le projet de décision 5.ext.com5 est adopté. Félicitations à l'Ukraine. Maintenant, j'aimerais donner la parole pour 2 minutes à monsieur, au plus, me dit Monsieur le Secrétaire, à Monsieur Alexandre Tkachenko, ministre de la Culture et de la Politique de l'Information. La parole est à vous, Monsieur le Ministre.
Merci beaucoup. Dear Mr. Chairperson, distinguished members of Intergovernmental Committee, state parties and participants of 16th session of Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. On behalf of Ukraine, and especially on behalf of Ukrainian people, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for supporting and inscription the element as a culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking in the list of intangible culture heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. Without exaggeration, this is a significant event for Ukraine today, especially today. Despite all social and humanitarian stress caused by the full-scale war on the territory of Ukraine, many Ukrainian families will eat borscht for lunch today. In destroyed cities, in frontline, in other countries that kindly sheltered Ukrainians, with meat, fish, or just vegetables from own garden. Ukraine borscht is a single gastronomic symbol and a marker of our national identity. The culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking is not only an element of the intangible culture heritage of Ukraine, but the way of living. Therefore, Ukrainian borscht and the culture of cooking contribute to strong social and dialogical interaction among all social groups of Ukrainian society. Ukrainian borscht is a mandatory element of Ukrainian ritual culture, both happy events and mourning. However, now we want the borscht to continue to be associated with wonderful Ukrainian traditions, not with famine and war. The full-scale war in Ukraine completely changes not only our understanding of the world in which we lived, but also our attitude to values and traditions, the understanding that we can lose them and any moment forces us to take even more seriously the safeguarding of our intangible culture heritage. All the Ukrainians have united unprecedentedly to preserve all our Ukrainian, which means freedom, territory, and culture. The state, together with the barrier communities, will continue to make every effort to ensure that this element develops so that the threats to its existence finally disappear. But inclusion of the culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking to UNESCO list will present the importance of safeguarding Ukrainian traditions for the world, and we hope to stop Russian aggression even on culinary front as well. Let me thank you once again for your high trust on behalf of the bearers of the element, for whom your assessment are a reward for their big efforts. We believe it is a victory of culture and will continue to be committed for the ideals preserving culture heritage around the world. Thank you very much for your attention and thank you for this decision.
Thank you, Minister, and once again, congratulations on behalf of all the committee members. I think that we have now a little film over the borscht.
We have collected over 40 borscht recipes. The dish has 5 main ingredients: potatoes, red beets, carrots, cabbage, and onions. At first, water in a pan is put the vegetables, and then each housewife application can be different, and so the taste too. At the national level, the element is recognized as a part of culture, as the culture of cooking borscht is perceived as a part of the national heritage. This is the first time in the Ukrainian history of submitting an element to the national list, when all Ukrainian elements is included, not a regional one. That's why the culture of Ukrainian borscht cooking unites the whole country. The carriers in which we recorded the elements have a direct connection with a specific element. They are carriers of regional features and tradition of Ukrainian borscht cooking, and also consider it is a part of their heritage. Represent historical recipe, feature and regional traditions of Ukrainian borscht cooking in their region. In addition, our history is connected with this element. Borscht is our identity.
Merci. Je voudrais m'adresser d'abord aux membres du comité parce que, félicitons-nous, parce que c'est la première fois que nous utilisons la procédure d'extrême urgence prévue par la Convention, à savoir l'article 17.3. Et je voudrais une nouvelle fois féliciter l'Ukraine par rapport à cette inscription. Je passe maintenant à la clôture de notre session et je vous remercie en fait parce qu'elle a été très fluide et comme je l'espérais, très douce. Merci à vous, membres du comité. Donc nous arrivons à la fin d'une journée de travail, d'une demi-journée de travail très productive. Je tiens à vous féliciter tous pour votre esprit de coopération qui nous a permis de prendre aujourd'hui des décisions importantes pour le futur de la Convention. Votre engagement fort et votre volonté de travailler ensemble dans un esprit de consensus ont rendu mon travail de président très gratifiant et je vous en suis infiniment reconnaissant. Plus de 220 personnes provenant de 85 pays différents se sont inscrites pour prendre part à cette session extraordinaire du comité. Cela démontre, encore une fois, l'intérêt que nos travaux revêtent pour les États et autres parties prenantes à la Convention de 2003. Permettez-moi de souligner la contribution significative effectuée par ce comité à la réforme des mécanismes d'inscription sur les listes de la Convention, en soumettant de nouvelles révisions aux directives opérationnelles qui reflètent les recommandations faites par le groupe de travail intergouvernemental à composition non limitée en avril de cette année. Notre session a permis de préparer de la meilleure des manières les travaux de l'Assemblée générale qui clôtureront la réflexion fructueuse lancée depuis 2018. Une autre réalisation remarquable de cette session est la décision que nous venons tout juste de prendre pour permettre l'inscription de la culture de la préparation du bortsch ukrainien sur la liste du patrimoine culturel immatériel nécessitant une sauvegarde urgente en tant que cas d'extrême urgence. Cette application sans précédent de l'article 17.3 de la Convention démontre une nouvelle fois la capacité de la Convention et de ses organes directeurs à s'adapter et à réagir dans les cas d'urgence. Il ne s'est écoulé en effet que 3 mois depuis la réception de la demande de l'Ukraine le 21 avril 2022. Enfin, je souhaiterais exprimer ma plus sincère gratitude au sous-directeur régional pour la culture, M. Ernesto Ottone, et au secrétaire de la Convention, M. Tim Curtis, et à toutes leurs équipes qui ont fait un merveilleux travail et qui nous ont permis aujourd'hui d'atteindre nos objectifs par rapport à la session qui a été la nôtre aujourd'hui. Grâce à leur dévouement constant, Tim et son équipe ont permis la tenue de cette réunion dans les meilleurs délais possibles, permettant d'une part de répondre à la demande de l'Ukraine en un temps record et d'autre part à l'Assemblée générale qui se réunira dans quelques jours d'examiner l'ensemble des résultats obtenus par le groupe de travail intergouvernemental sur les mécanismes d'inscription sur les listes. Merci encore à vous. Avant de procéder à la clôture de cette session, je voudrais donner une dernière occasion à M. Ottone, sous-directeur général pour la culture, et à M. Curtis de dire quelques mots. La parole est à vous, Monsieur l'ADG.
Thank you, Chairperson. As you know, this extraordinary session fulfilled one of the key functions assigned to the committee by the Article 7E of the Convention, the preparation of operational directive to be approved by the General Assembly. Thanks to the decision taken today on the basis of the significant work carried out by experts and the open-ended intergovernmental working group since last year, the General Assembly will be able, in a few days, to examine an entire set of revision of the operational directives, which will conclude the reform and improve the implementation of the listing mechanism for states and for the communities. The extraordinary session was an important step towards achieving the reform of the Convention listing mechanism. Allow me to commend one more time the significant achievement made by the Convention. Through the committee decision today, the inscription of an element of the urgent safeguarding list on an accelerated basis is a landmark in the history of the Convention, giving a concrete realization to the operational principles and modalities for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage in emergencies adopted in 2020. Echoing the words of the chairperson, it is UNESCO's wish that this inscription will highlight the role that living heritage can play for the physical and physiological resilience of communities affected by armed conflict. My sincere thanks, of course, go to you, Mr. Chairperson, as always, for the excellent leadership you demonstrated throughout this morning. This has been a very constructive session, in large part thanks to the admirable way you handled the debate in this online format that is not always so cute to see. We also owe, of course, a tremendous thanks to all the committee members, in particular for the spirit of dialogue demonstrated not only today, but also in the past 4 years, since this is the last time that the committee in its current composition is meeting. In a few days, 12 members will complete their mandate. Let me take this opportunity to express our appreciation to all of them for their unerring engagement towards the safeguarding of living heritage and the international, at the international level. Well, I look forward to seeing many of you in person, I hope, use the mask at the General Assembly of the Convention on Tuesday. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairperson, and I wish also to thank the whole team of Team and Fumiko, who do a tremendous work that is really a pleasure to work with all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. ADG, for the kind words. And I would like, before closing this session, to ask if there is any requests for the floor from the committee members. I see none. That means everybody is happy with the work done. Anyway, je voudrais, avant de clore cette session, vous dire un grand merci à tous. Merci à Monsieur l'ADG, merci à Tim et son équipe qui a fait un travail merveilleux, et merci surtout aux membres du comité et, comme l'a dit Monsieur l'ADG, à l'esprit extrêmement positif, constructif, efficace dont vous avez fait preuve. Et comme l'a dit Monsieur l'ADG, je saisis aussi cette occasion qui m'est donnée pour féliciter sincèrement les membres sortants du comité qui ont fait un travail merveilleux durant ce mandat et qui ont permis justement de faire avancer les choses par rapport à la mise en œuvre de cette convention de 2003 et, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, qui suscite de plus en plus d'intérêt. Et nous en sommes extrêmement heureux. Donc voilà, j'espère que nous allons nous revoir bien sûr pour l'Assemblée générale. Et je vous dis aussi à très bientôt à Rabat, au Maroc, pour la 17e session du comité qui se déroulera du 28 novembre au 3 décembre 2022. Et j'espère qu'on sera à la hauteur de vos attentes pour que votre séjour se passe de la manière la plus agréable possible, conformément à l'hospitalité légendaire du Maroc, évidemment. Et cela ne veut pas dire que nous n'allons pas travailler, évidemment, nous allons travailler et devoir être extrêmement efficaces par rapport à l'agenda qui nous attend. Voilà, je clôt cette session et encore une fois, merci beaucoup à tous et félicitations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. See you Tuesday.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Merci, le président. Au revoir. Thank you.